Welcome to Mindshift. I'm Brandon. Today is another Tuesday Takedown, and I'm going to do this one a bit different. I actually have 5 clips that I had already saved to do deep dives into. I'm feeling pretty under the weather. You can probably hear it in my voice. And so I thought, you know what? Let's rapid fire response to these 5 clips. And to make it a little bit more fun, do any of you remember being little and listening to the radio when that was still a thing? And the DJ would play 3 songs in a row, and the audience was supposed to guess what was the common link. Maybe they were all covers, maybe they all came out the same year, maybe they all had the same drummer, whatever the case might have been. So I'm curious to know what you guys who are watching will view as the commonality between these 5 clips. I'm sure there's many. I've got one main one in my head, but please let me know in the comments what stood out to you. Let's watch our first clip here. And this one comes to us from a decent sized channel. It's like 25,000 subscribers, who is Pastor Melissa Scott. She's going to be talking about hate crimes and Christians.
From 2018 to 2023, the rise in crimes against churches and Christians has gone up. It is beyond what I can even quote in terms of statistics. It's doubled or quadrupled. Yet, it's never a crime. Did you notice that? It's never a hate crime, because Christians are going to be squeezed again. I'm just telling you, cheer up, saints, it's going to get worse. We are seeing history kind of repeat itself in a certain way. Time of Christ, people didn't dare step out, or thereafter, just after his ascension, didn't dare step out and say they were Christians for fear of being persecuted or killed. We are almost heading back into that right now as we speak.
Okay, there's so much there to reply to. I'm not even sure if I know how to do this rapid fire kind of a thing. I do want this to be quick, so let's take our best stab at it. The first thing is just and I don't mean to be mean here, but it's a scientific illiteracy. And it's because people who get in these positions of spiritual authority are simply not required to go through, yet alone encouraged to understand the science of things, statistics, research, etc. I see exactly where she's quoting from. It appears to be an article by the Daily Citizen from Focus on the Family. That's a very unbiased source, where it says that over 400 attacks on churches happened in 2023, and that represents a recent 800% increase. So I did some digging myself, and there was 436 attacks in 2023, best that I can tell from objective resources. However, that's pretty on par with what the growing trend was back in 2018, 19, and 20. Then we saw a dip during COVID, probably because many churches were not meeting or had moved to online meeting, and now we're seeing that resurgence in kind of normal times. This is a very common dip with COVID in general across many things, including other hate crime statistics. So I'm not saying it's ever okay or a good thing that any church or Christian is attacked simply for being a church or a Christian. But to act like we all of a sudden have some insane Satanist or demonic uprising against Christians is simply not true. Not only that, but they're increasing at the same rate as all other hate crimes. I'm utilizing information from the DOJ and the FBI's Uniform Crime Reporting Statistics, UCR, for hate crimes. And the data here is really interesting. For all hate crimes in 2023, 59% of them were attributed because of race, ethnicity, or ancestry. Religion was 17.3. That's a good chunk, but not all of that is Christian. In fact, the largest chunk of that is actually Jewish. And also, these stats are for the United States, where Christians make up the vast majority. So we should have seen more hate crimes towards Christians, and yet it's still focused unevenly towards those of the Jewish faith. Interesting enough, 0.1% less, 17.2 instead of 17.3, come from sexual orientation, which again, none of this is excusable. But my point is simply that you're seeing typical numbers. You're not even in the religion that is the most acted out against, even though you are the predominant religion of the country. It is as likely to have a hate crime committed against you because of your sexual orientation, and it is still far more likely to have it be based off race or ethnicity, which equals nothing. Nothing for her to talk about, nothing for her to rally her troops up about. There is simply no new information here. And if you're unhappy with the rise of attacks in general that seems to have this still upward trend for everyone in hate crimes, maybe we should look at society at large and not just your particular in-group. Shouldn't the church be one of the places fighting this the most? I wonder what they're doing to help combat the 17.2% that is done because of sexual orientation. I bet they haven't said a peep about it. And going back very briefly here, when I said it's unfortunate because you can tell that she just doesn't have a grasp of this or how to research it herself or anything like this, it's because she's saying things like, in a statistical way, it can't be measured. And then she throws out two statistics, that it doubles and that it quadruples, which it cannot be both. And then she immediately follows that up by saying, but it's never a crime. Well, then how did you get the information reported? It is considered a hate crime, and the UCR documents it and takes it as seriously as all other kinds of hate crime. You wouldn't have any numbers to be talking about if it wasn't considered a crime. This is such an interesting thing that I see happen all the time. You know, we just got done talking about the eclipse for our last video. It's like you need science to make your first claim, hey, the eclipse is coming, hey, crime has gone up, but then you want to immediately let go of the science to bring in the spiritual side. It means it's a prophecy of doom, and we're so persecuted our government won't even consider it a hate crime. You know, you don't get to have both of these without both of these. If you're just listening, this is not going to make sense. I use my hands a lot. And then she ends with the worst statement of them all, which is that it's come full cycle again back to this time of severe persecution after Jesus' resurrection, where Christians are afraid to step out and speak because they think they'll be hurt or killed. This is simply not true. There is not one street corner you couldn't go to and hand out a tract, profess Jesus as Lord, invite someone to church, pass out a Bible. You might not like the looks you get. People might tell you to shove off. I'm not saying that everyone is just going to love it, but the idea that Christians are in fear of their lives if they even open their mouth, 436 attacks in the entire nation last year. Again, not trying to minimize, still horrific, but in no way shows a realistic picture of people not being able to speak out on fear of death. The second clip here is from Pastor Daniel Adams, who has a huge following. It's 996,000 subscribers. And Daniel Adams is a miracle worker. The name of his channel is called The Supernatural Life. I'm going to show you a clip here, and there's much we could talk about, but there's really just one thing I want to point out.
Today I want to talk to this. You cannot suffer with this any longer. Do you talk? You don't talk? So you're not a talking spirit? You don't have much of a personality? You're trying to choke out her spiritual life. You walked into her life in the night through a dream. You entered into her through the night. I saw this spirit wanting to impregnate you. That's why there's been a lot of struggle and a lot of torment, and this thing doesn't want to let go. It's almost like the words I hear is you were wanted to be the devil's promise in the family. But today, we end that. Now, today, your time in these women come to an end. You listen to me now. Come out of her body. Come out of her body. Now, be free. Fire!
I'm sorry. I don't mean to laugh, but yelling fire at the end is about as funny as it gets for this kind of a scenario. There's a couple of things here that I want to talk about really briefly. One is almost any time, if you watch enough of these videos, which unfortunately I have, plus I was around it so much growing up, anytime that it is a man, guess what the demons are? Demons of lust and anger and murderous vengeance. And almost without fail, every single time it is a woman, it is about some sexual issue. In this case, it's a night demon that comes in through the dreams trying to impregnate this woman. The only reason that Daniel here believes that demons have this power is because I'm sure he also believes in the Nephilim, the sons of God or angels that came down and bred with the women. That is how we got the giants that the Bible speaks about. It is also the bad seed that was supposedly wiped out in Noah's flood. Some of that is actually in Genesis. A lot of it actually comes from extra-canonical sources like the book of Enoch. But regardless, there's an idea that God made angels with human anatomy. What, pray tell, could ever be the purpose of that if this God were real and he's all good? Creating a heavenly host that are essentially superhumans, that have free will supposedly enough to reject God, dominion over the earth to come down and do as they please, and the physical capabilities to harm women in these sexual ways and impregnate them. Let's just take it to its final conclusion. That means that a lot, like very often, we should be seeing miraculous births with virgin women. And yet there's not one story like this from a hospital, from a medical study. Aside from that nonsense, I just want to see if anyone caught the main thing I want to point out in this short clip. I'll show it again really quick.
I saw this spirit wanting to impregnate you. That's why there's been a lot of struggle and a lot of torment.
That's right. There's a sign language interpreter there, meaning for people that are either hard of hearing or deaf in this service, where a man is on repeat casting out demons of iniquity, many of which have to do with particular health conditions. It is too much for him, who has been gifted supernatural healing and exorcism. He has many other videos on healing, by the way, to improve their hearing. He had to spend church budget. Someone sat down and had to make a decision with a group of elders on if it was worth hiring an interpreter. Or best case scenario, there's someone there who noticed there's enough deaf people in the audience, and she said, hey, I'd like to help out and volunteer for your services. To which he and the other leadership said, yes, that would be helpful, thank you. In what world do you have this kind of a church setting going on, and do you have any deaf members? The kind where it's not real. Let's go on to our third clip. Another pastor. This is a pastor of a church called Greenhouse Church.
I can't believe in a God who would send someone to hell. I'm like, oh, I'm so glad you said that, because my God doesn't send anybody to hell. The God, there is a heaven, there is a hell. My God, he's the God that did every single thing at his disposal to stop people from going to hell. He did everything he could.
So I'm going to stop it there to save you from before he gets his prop out, which is a life preserver that he throws out to the audience to show that God has indeed given us an escape from hell, and it's via his son Jesus, and that we would have to jump over Jesus's body to get to hell. Now, I've handled the objection of we send ourselves to hell in this video here, so if you're actually looking for a more thoughtful and in-depth response, go check that out. The thing that I want to focus on here is something that I've heard many times, not just in this one clip, which is that God did everything in his power to stop us from going to hell. Let's just think about that one for a second. And hopefully all of you listening can see, and maybe you're a believer or someone on the fence and you just really haven't thought about this yet. Who created hell? God. Who allows its existence to remain? God. Who created the devil and any other fallen angel that inhabits hell, or is supposed to inhabit hell, or that is trying to deceive us to bring us to hell? God. Who had the foreknowledge that all of this would happen? God. Who is claimed to be omnipotent? God. How can you believe your God is all-powerful and then out of your mouth as an excuse for the most horrific thing in all of Christian doctrine, the concept of hell, your excuse for that is God already did everything in his power? No, he didn't. If he exists, no, he didn't. He didn't abolish it. He didn't destroy it. He didn't choose never to create it. He didn't destroy Satan the second he turned so that he could not harm us. Instead, he gave him purposeful dominion and power over this planet with the ability to deceive and get into our thoughts and heart and mind and soul. He did not make sure that everyone had the same access to the truth. He did not help people that he built to be wired differently, to think more critically or require more evidence before guessing at afterlives. He did not cater to them what they would need to believe. He did not make an inerrant book. He made a collection of books supposedly over 1,500 years via 40 different authors in 3 different languages to be the most confusing thing ever that even followers of Christ can't agree on. He never updated it. He gave us very, very horrific evidence, if you can even call it that at all, to believe in his son in the first place. It almost seems like a more accurate statement would be this God did the bare minimum, if not less than nothing at all, to make sure that people don't go to hell. Sorry, you don't get to claim an all-powerful, perfect, loving God who wants none to be lost and say that he's done everything in his power to stop people from going to hell. If people do go to hell, and if this God is real, he sends them there. Speaking for myself, I would not want to go to hell. I would not send myself there, and I definitely, if found to be there, would not keep myself there. So if I'm there forever, it's because someone or something is keeping me there, and the buck stops at God. Let's move on to clip number 4. And this one comes to us again from Daily Dose of Wisdom, which we've handled 1 or 2 times, but let's watch this clip.
In Aristotle, only 49 manuscripts. Do you know what there is of the New Testament? I've been able to document 24,633 manuscripts.
This has so many baked in errors in terms of what it's trying to promote, which is, and this is how Christians use it, even though this clip is rather short, that there is something more valid about Jesus and thus Christianity because of the number of manuscripts. And this is just fundamentally not true. We would need to get into so much, and this is one maybe I wish I would have saved, or maybe I'll revisit for a longer video. But just briefly, we would need to look into how many of these are originals versus copies or translations. The reason that the early Christian church was so prolific at making copies versus some of these philosophers that it's compared up against. Why are we not comparing this to other religions? How accurate are the originals anyways? How close to the events that they're trying to record as history were they written? All of a sudden, those numbers aren't so impressive anymore. So what if it was copied 20,000 times? We can't even get agreement on which ones are correct and which ones are not. We have conflicting claims about this character via some of these very numerous manuscripts. And most importantly of all, it doesn't make it any more true. You know, the common Christian argument with this kind of a chart or graph is, look, you believe in people like Aristotle and Plato, and you have way less reason to. I do not rely on Aristotle or Plato for my salvation. I don't need them to get out of an eternity of torment. They are not how I orient my life. Even if I like some of their philosophical ideas, just like I like some of Jesus's philosophical ideas, it wouldn't hurt me one bit to find out that instead of Jesus, it was actually some dude named Brian that wrote that. In the same way that, it wasn't actually Aristotle, it was his younger cousin, but Aristotle took credit. Oh well, I still liked the idea. I still found use in it. I'm not looking at it as a source of objective truth. I really do not understand why these kinds of concepts are so hard for a mass amount of believers to hear or to understand. It's an appeal to majority. It doesn't mean anything. Copies and translations only prove that there were some people who thought it was worth copying and translating. It just doesn't do what the Christians want this to do. Who cares if someone made a lot more copies about Jesus and the religion that turned into Christianity than they did Tacitus or Pliny the Younger? Sounds like some people at some time really believed in this Jesus figure. Great, I'm not a mythicist. I could care less. Maybe he existed, maybe he didn't. Maybe he said some of the things he did, maybe he didn't. Did he raise from the dead? Did he heal the sick? Did he walk on water? Did he fly into heaven? Was he there at the beginning of the creation of the earth? It doesn't mean any of the claims throughout the rest of the text are valid. It's that simple. Let's move on to clip number 5, which comes from the very popular Mark Driscoll. He has 350,000 subscribers, but I want you to watch this clip just for a minute. Humor me here.
The Nephilim are here on Earth. A lot of the Nephilim actually can shapeshift into human. People, their eyes turn into these reptile slits for a split second and then go back to just being a human. A lot of the Nephilim right now are doing experiments on humans. Area 51, all these deep underground military bases, humans attached to machines doing mind control experiments on them. People want to act like that stuff doesn't exist, but you could do research.
So I'm going to show you his reaction, but just look at him. Look at how ridiculous he finds this, the disdain, the humor that he sees in this. He looks as though he's just fed up with all the nonsense, finds it so silly, and he's going to set the record straight. Let's hear how he does that.
Just say no to drugs, kids. The Nephilim was a counterfeit of the incarnation. So you have the sons of God, fallen demonic beings, trying to have children with the daughters of men. Those are females on the earth. The goal would be a counterfeit. You would have fully demonic, fully human. That was an attempt at the Antichrist. It failed, and instead God preserved things for the coming of Jesus Christ, fully God, fully man. There is a demonic realm, but do we have any evidence that this is happening underground military depots? The evidence is not conclusive.
The irony, the hypocrisy, the double standard here as he laughs off and says these kids have been smoking too much weed. There's no evidence for this. But when he sets the record straight, you see that it is just one conspiracy theorist watching another conspiracy theorist as he goes on to explain that there's definitely a demonic realm. And here's the deal. You had this guy who's fully human and fully God, because that doesn't sound crazy at all. And he was also there at the beginning with God. And when God created these separate entities that were angels, which we talked about earlier, he endowed them with male genitalia and the freedom to come down, and they tried to do this coup to bring about the Antichrist. It's like you might as well say Bizarro Superman. And they were trying to create this army, but it failed because God in his sovereignty had a greater plan. Like, it actually sounds crazier than the first clip that he's watching. It's just the kind of crazy he's used to, the kind of crazy he's so indoctrinated with that he can't see past. It is reality to him that there is this spiritual dark realm that he is constantly fighting against, that there are these angels trying to impregnate women, to bring up an army, to bring out the Antichrist that will try to go to war against the perfect God who already knows the future and says he won't lose, that supposedly the devil himself believes in and would thus believe that message and yet is still trying to fight. Like, it's fairy tales laughing at other fairy tales. This is insanity. And I think that it's extremely telling because, yeah, there might be another Christian. How far back can you do this, who watches Mark and says, the Nephilim weren't real. That's Enoch stuff. Genesis, the mention of giants there is just different in the same way that people lived longer, people were taller, maybe the oxygen levels were different. They talk about some kind of a scientific thing. And then you have another Christian behind him watching him who's saying, there weren't even giants. It's a mistranslation. Like we have no reason to believe this. We don't even think that people live that long. Like actually, when the Bible talks about ages, it's talking about it like this. And you zoom out again and someone's critiquing that. And it's just turtles all the way down. How do people not see how myopic it is to believe you have this perfect version of the fairy tale and any other alteration of it is when it becomes too fantastic, too nonsensical? Again, I think it's an extremely telling thing here. And it speaks very loudly for itself, so I won't. You know what I will do, though? I'm going to give you a bonus video. We're going to go back to Pastor Daniel, and I'm going to show you another one of his demon exorcisms and see if you can spot the bit of irony here.
I don't understand this. I'm free.
You're free.
Yes.
Who's your Lord and Savior?
Jesus.
Jesus who?
No.
Always test the spirit. A real demon will not say Jesus Christ is God.
Jesus is not God.
How did you get in?
Husband.
Ooh. Is the husband here?
No. Jail.
Oh. She doesn't want you anymore, does she?
No.
That means you're illegal.
Yes.
That means you're in a place that you shouldn't be.
Yes.
I command this spirit spouse that tried to destroy her marriage. Now God says her marriage will be restored. Go ahead and leave her. Leave her. Leave her.
The thing that I always like to point out with these demon possession videos are the inconsistencies. Let's really think about this. The woman marries a man who goes to jail, and yet it is through that man that the demon came into this woman. Because again, remember, if a woman has a demon, it's probably via some kind of sexual thing. And here we have a fun little test for the demon. A demon will not say Jesus is God, and we see the demon refuse to say that. But did you see the first line on her shirt? It says, Jesus is my God. Do you think the demon was asleep this morning when she was picking out her wardrobe? Did he just not care? He's obviously controlling this woman's entire life. Look, he's controlling her movements during the video. That's what they're laughing about. She thinks she's free, and he can so obviously see she's not because the demon has control over her body. And yet this demon still chose to bring her into a house of worship where a known exorcist was performing exorcisms, wearing a shirt that he allowed her to pick out and put on that says the antithesis of what this demon is supposed to allow to be said in the world. It's almost as ridiculous as having a sign language interpreter at a faith healing service. The saddest part here is that regardless, people are being taken advantage of, whether it is the audience via an actor, and many of these people have been exposed as actors, or whether it is the person that is having this happen to them, that is being told they're healed, that is being told they're released of this thing that was over them, that they are going to just have some supernatural blessing now over their marriage. Her husband's in jail. I don't think it's going to be restored anytime soon. People get false hope. They get false information, whether it is about them physically or their situation. It is disgusting. It is the lowest form of the con man. So that's it. Those are 6 videos for you. Again, I think there's a lot of common threads going through there, but I think there's one that is just very obvious and something that at all levels of Christianity is a main issue. We will not be having secular Bible study series this Thursday. I apologize. We're going to be traveling here for the eclipse for the next week, and I'll still have a video come out on Sunday and hopefully next Tuesday. But then after that, I hope to be back and more in the swing of things. So until then, keep Thank you. I wanted to personally thank all of my top tiers of support, my Iconoclast, Anne, Boris, GVI, Jacob, Joe, Martin, Oliver, Perry, Rokkit, and Shawn, my Humanist heroes, Jarrod and Kristi, my Atheist advocates, Caleb, Imposter, Jeff, Jeffrey, Karen, Sparky, and Todd, as well as all of my Secular Scholar patrons. If you believe in the mission of this channel or you just enjoy its content, please consider joining these fine people.